My name is Cassandra Vale. I was 38 years old when I buried my mother and prepared to bury my sister. The scent of wilting lilies clung to the air inside St. Ignatius Cathedral, thick and cloying, like regret. Rain lashed the stained glass windows, turning the world outside into a watercolor smear of Seattle gray. I stood near the gleaming mahogany casket, my hand resting lightly on my father's trembling arm. He leaned into me, a pillar of grief slowly crumbling. My own grief was a cold, hard stone in my chest. But beneath it, coiled and ready, was something else. Anticipation. Dread. Because she was coming. 6 years. 6 years since Vivian Vale, my younger sister, by barely 18 months, had slithered into my life and stolen Julian Thorne, my fiancé, my future, the man whose promises had tasted like honeyed poison. I hadn't seen either of them since the day I walked out of Julian's downtown penthouse office, my world in ashes. And now, Vivian would walk through those heavy cathedral doors, draped in the spoils of her treachery, expecting what? Pity? Forgiveness? A broken woman to gloat over. The murmur of mourners dipped. A hush fell, thick and expectant. Heads turned towards the entrance. The massive oak doors groaned open, framing them against the stormy light. Julian entered first, his custom-tailored black suit fitting like a second skin, the picture of somber wealth. His hair, still unnervingly perfect, was swept back, revealing the sharp angles of a face that had once made my breath catch. Now it just made my stomach clench. He scanned the room, his gaze sharp, assessing, calculating the room's social currency even here, even now. Then she appeared. Vivian. She glided in, a vision of curated mourning. Her black dress wasn't just black, it was liquid onyx, clinging to her slender frame, cut low enough to hint at scandal even in this sacred space. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, catching the dim cathedral light, like chips of ice. But it was her left hand, resting possessively on Julian's arm, that held the room's attention. The ring. A monstrous, square-cut diamond solitaire, flanked by smaller, equally icy stones. The ring I had worn for 18 months. The ring Julian had slipped onto my finger during a sunset cruise on Elliott Bay. She held her hand slightly elevated, ensuring maximum visibility. Her eyes, scanning the crowd, finally locked onto mine, and she smiled. Not a smile of shared sorrow, not a smile of awkward reconciliation. It was a slow, deliberate curve of her perfectly painted lips. Smug, triumphant. A conqueror surveying her vanquished foe at the very moment of her greatest vulnerability. A strange, unnatural calm washed over me, like diving into deep, still water after being battered by a storm. The raw edges of my grief, the simmering anger, they didn't vanish, but they were suddenly held at bay, encased in ice. She had no idea, none. Who was waiting? What I'd become? Who stood beside me now, a silent sentinel of my rebuilt life? Before the blood drained from her face, before the mask of triumph cracked and fell, let me tell you how I clawed my way out of the abyss she and Julian shoved me into. But first, know this. Revenge isn't always a shout. Sometimes it's the coldest, most satisfying silence. My mother, Eleanor Vale, was the beating heart, the steady rhythm of our family. Our home, a modest but warm craftsman bungalow nestled in the perpetually green hills of West Seattle, always smelled of her baking. Cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings, chocolate chip cookies after school. She was strength wrapped in kindness, wisdom delivered with a soft touch. We shared a language only mothers and daughters understand, a bond forged in whispered secrets over hot cocoa, in her unwavering belief in me, even when I doubted myself. Even after I landed my dream job as a senior brand strategist at Sterling & Gray, in downtown Seattle and moved into a sleek high-rise apartment with views of the Space Needle. Our nightly calls were sacred. She was my compass, my confessor, my fiercest champion. When the diagnosis came 8 months ago, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the ground fell away. The aggressive treatments were brutal, a war waged on a battlefield already lost. Yet Eleanor faced it with a grace that humbled us all. Her concern was never for her own pain, only for ours, Dad's stoic worry, my frantic attempts to fix the unfixable, even Vivian's conspicuous absence, masked by expensive care packages. Her final days were spent in the sunroom of our family home, surrounded by the faded floral wallpaper and the ghosts of happier times. She slipped away quietly one rain-slicked dawn, her fragile hand in mine, extracting a final, whispered promise. Find peace, Cassie. Build a life, filled with light. 6 years earlier, at 32, I thought I had built that life. On paper, it glittered. Sterling and Gray was a powerhouse. My corner office overlooked Puget Sound. My social calendar was full of gallery openings and charity galas. I dated charming, successful men, architects, surgeons, venture capitalists. But something vital was missing, a hollow echo in the carefully curated spaces of my existence. I worked 70-hour weeks, filling the void with spreadsheets and strategy sessions. Relationships were pleasant distractions, fleeting connections that dissolved like mist. Then, at a gala fundraiser for the Seattle Art Museum, my college roommate, Chloe, introduced me to Julian Thorne. He was magnetic. Not just handsome, but possessing an aura of effortless control, the kind that made rooms tilt towards him. Flawless teeth in a confident smile, eyes the color of storm-tossed slate that seemed to see right through you. A self-made tech titan at 35, his company, Viridian Dynamics, was the darling of Silicon North. Our connection was instantaneous, a high-voltage current. We spoke the same language, a love for obscure indie films, a shared passion for hiking the Cascades, an ambition that crackled between us. After our first date, an exclusive, hushed dinner at the Pink Door, hidden away in Post Alley, I called Mom, breathless. "I met him, Mom. I really think I met him." It accelerated like a runaway train. Weekends whisked away to secluded cabins on Orcas Island. Private boxes at the symphony where the music felt like it was playing just for us. Intimate dinners where the world outside ceased to exist. Julian was relentless in his pursuit. Lavish gifts appeared, a limited edition print from an artist I'd casually admired, a weekend spa retreat when I mentioned stress. Meticulously planned surprises, a hot air balloon ride over the Skagit Valley tulip fields. After 18 dizzying months, during a private dinner on his sleek yacht, the Viridian, moored in Elliott Bay under a canopy of stars, Julian went down on one knee. The ring he produced wasn't just jewelry, it was a declaration, a 5-carat emerald-cut diamond that threw sparks like captured lightning. "Yes," I breathed, the word lost in the sudden roar of blood in my ears. 1,000 times yes. My parents were overjoyed. Mom, especially, immediately began sketching wedding ideas on napkins, her eyes shining. Julian had the resources to orchestrate a fairy tale, and Eleanor Vale was determined her daughter would have it. "No holding back, Cassie," she'd insisted, squeezing my hand. "You deserve every bit of magic." Then there was Vivian. 2 years younger, but light years ahead in ruthless ambition. Our childhood was a tapestry woven with fierce love and fiercer competition. If I loved a doll, Vivian needed it, then discarded it once it was hers. If I made the volleyball team, Vivian had to be captain. If I received praise, Vivian would orchestrate a scene demanding equal attention. Mom, our eternal peacemaker, navigated the minefield with saintly patience, carving out individual moments of connection for each of us. Despite the history, the scars, I chose Vivian as my maid of honor. Mom believed it could bridge the gap. I wanted, desperately, to believe that adulthood had sanded down her jagged edges. When I introduced Vivian to Julian at a family dinner at our bungalow, her reaction was intense. She complimented his suit, his watch, his visionary business sense. Her laughter at his jokes was a fraction too loud, too bright. I noticed her fingers lingering on his forearm, her body angled towards him like a flower seeking the sun. I dismissed it. Vivian being Vivian, charming, effusive, always playing to the room, our engagement party transformed our parents' backyard into a twinkling wonderland. Vivian had thrown herself into the preparations with uncharacteristic zeal, draping fairy lights through the old apple trees, arranging mountains of white roses. Throughout the evening, my gaze kept snagging on her. She was a constant satellite orbiting Julian, her eyes tracking his every move across the lawn. When our eyes met across the flickering candlelight, she didn't look away. She simply raised her champagne flute in a slow, deliberate toast, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Later, as the last guests called for Ubers, Mom cornered me in the kitchen while we packed leftover smoked salmon blinnies. "Cassie, darling," she murmured, her voice low and serious as she arranged cheese platters into containers. I couldn't help but notice. Vivian seems quite taken with Julian. Her eyes held a warning I didn't want to see. I forced a laugh, rinsing champagne flutes under too hot water. "She's just being friendly, Mom. Besides, she's practically engaged to that hotshot patent lawyer, Daniel." Daniel Reed. Charming, successful. Another shiny trophy for Vivian's shelf. Mom nodded, but the worry lines around her eyes deepened. "Just be mindful, sweetheart. You know how your sister covets what you have." I kissed her cheek, the scent of gardenias from her perfume a familiar comfort. "We're adults now, Mom. Vivian's happy for me." "I'm sure of it." How wrong I was. How catastrophically, soul-crushingly naive. 3 months before the wedding date circled in gold on my calendar, the cracks began to show. Julian started working late with alarming frequency. Texts would ping at midnight, 2 a.m., explained away with urgent calls from Tokyo or crisis with the Singapore launch. Our sacred Friday date nights, reservations at Canlis, walks along Alki Beach, were increasingly canceled for unavoidable investor dinners or emergency board strategy sessions. When we were together, his attention was fractured, his eyes constantly darting to the sleek black phone that seemed fused to his palm. Conversations became monologues, met with distracted uh-huhs and vacant stares. More insidious was the criticism, subtle barbs disguised as concern. My laugh, which he'd once called infectious, was suddenly a bit shrill in quiet restaurants. My favorite emerald green wrap dress, the one he'd said brought out my eyes, now washed me out. Even my nightly ritual of reading before bed, which he'd found adorably bookish, became an irritant. "The light from your Kindle keeps me awake, Cass. Can't you just scroll on your phone?" Simultaneously, Vivian's presence intensified. Calls became daily. "Just checking on the wedding plans, big sis," she'd chirp, though Mom was shouldering the bulk of the organization. "I insist on helping with the florist meeting next week. You're swamped at Sterling and Gray, and I want everything perfect for you." Her voice dripped with saccharine sincerity. One Thursday, Julian managed to keep a reservation at Lark, one of Seattle's most exclusive farm-to-table spots. He spent the entire meal dissecting his halibut with surgical precision, responding to my story about landing the Nordstrom account with a distracted, good. When his phone buzzed for the 5th time, vibrating against the white linen like an angry hornet, I snapped. "Is there somewhere more important you need to be, Julian?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm, masking the tremor beneath. He didn't look up. "Sorry, Viridian stuff. NDA headaches with the new acquisition. You know how it is. He finally met my gaze, his expression carefully blank. Pre-launch jitters. Later that week, sorting laundry in my pristine apartment, I froze. Julian's crisp white dress shirt, fresh from the dry cleaners, carried a scent not my own. Not my light, citrusy Joe Malone. This was heavy, cloying, aggressively floral. Gardenias and something darker, muskier. Expensive, but overpowering. Vivian's signature scent. Noir enigma. I'd smelled it at the engagement party. Confronting him that evening, I held the shirt out like evidence. He didn't flinch. "Oh, that?" "Rebecca Chen," he stated smoothly, taking the shirt and tossing it casually onto a chair. "Potential investor from Hong Kong, wears enough perfume to choke a horse. Practically hugged me goodbye after the pitch. Awkward, but culturally sensitive, I suppose." His explanation was slick, logical. I wanted, desperately, to believe him. I met Chloe for coffee at Victrola the next morning, the rich aroma doing little to settle my nerves. "Every couple hits turbulence before the wedding, Cass," she reassured me, stirring oat milk into her latte. "Bennett and I fought like rabid raccoons over napkin colors. Now, 5 years strong." Her smile was meant to be comforting, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Mom noticed the shadows under my eyes during our weekly lunch at Salty's. "You seem frayed, sweetheart," she said, her warm hand covering mine on the sun-warmed table. "Wedding whirlwind? Or something else?" I plastered on a smile. "Just the final push, Mom. Everything's fine." But everything was unraveling. I doubled down, desperate to fix whatever invisible thing I'd broken. I booked us a couple's massage weekend at Suncadia, bought lingerie that made me blush just looking at it. Attempted Julia child-level beef bourguignon, resulting in a minor kitchen fire and a very patient fire department. The harder I tried, the wider the gulf became. Julian's touch grew perfunctory, his compliments hollow. Then came the cake tasting. Julian had raved about it for weeks. "Best part of the whole circus, Cass," he'd grinned. That morning, his call came as I was choosing earrings. "Cassandra, disaster." His voice was clipped, urgent. "The Singapore investors are demanding an emergency video conference now. I can't possibly break away. Take Viv. She knows my preferences inside out. Chocolate ganache, not buttercream. She'll stand in for me." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the marble bathroom counter. How did my sister know my fiancé's cake preferences better than I did? Still numb, I accepted Vivian's eager offer to join me at Lady Yum later that day. Her presence was suffocating. "Julian adores the salted caramel with dark chocolate shavings," she declared, sampling a delicate macaron. "He mentioned it after that dinner at Ray's Boathouse last month. Don't you remember, Cass?" Her eyes held a challenge I couldn't decipher. The final straw came a week later. Preparing Julian's Tesla for a dinner party with his investors, I vacuumed the immaculate interior. My hand brushed something cold, metallic, wedged deep between the passenger seat and the center console. I pried it out. A single, dangling earring, silver, intricate filigree, set with a tiny, perfect sapphire. Our grandmother's earring, the one she'd left specifically to Vivian. Vivian had worn them at the engagement party. That evening, I placed the earring on the kitchen island like a grenade. Julian glanced at it, his expression unchanged. "Oh, that." He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers. "Vivian must have dropped it when I gave her a lift to the airport last Tuesday. Her Jag was in the shop. She mentioned losing one. Saved me a trip to return it." His delivery was flawless. When I called Vivian, her voice was bright, rehearsed. "Oh my God, my sapphire, thank goodness you found it. Julian was a lifesaver giving me a ride. That damn dealership." Her story mirrored his perfectly. Too perfectly. Sleep became a stranger. My mind raced down dark corridors. Were they laughing at me? Was I going mad? My reflection grew gaunt, haunted. My therapist's discreet diagnosis, severe anxiety with depressive episodes. Medication dulled the edges but couldn't touch the core wound. 3 weeks before the wedding date, Julian dropped the bomb over breakfast. "Cassandra, I think we need to postpone." I stared at him, my oatmeal turning to cement in my bowl. "Postpone?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "You're not yourself. Stressed, thin. Maybe we rushed into this. Maybe—" He trailed off, gesturing vaguely. I broke. Tears, snot, desperate pleas. What did I do? Tell me. How can I fix it? I clung to him, searching his face for the man I loved. He held me, his arms stiff. "It's not you. It's timing. Pressure." His eyes, when they finally met mine, were empty, hollow, like looking into a boarded-up window. That night, I woke at 3:17 a.m. to cold, empty sheets. The apartment was silent, oppressive. Then a murmur, Julian's voice, hushed, urgent, coming from his home office down the hall. I crept barefoot across the cold hardwood. "Not now. She'll hear us." I know. Soon. I promise." The words were ice water down my spine. She. Not an investor. Not a colleague. She. The next day, I decided to surprise him. A peace offering. I picked up his favorite pastrami on rye from Dingfelder's Deli. As I was leaving, Dad called. "Cassie girl, you eating?" His voice was gruff with worry. "Your mother says you look like a strong wind would knock you over." "I'm fine, Dad," I lied, forcing lightness into my voice. "Just pre-wedding madness. Actually heading to Julian's office now with lunch." "Good. That boy better be treating my princess right, or he answers to me." If only you knew. The security guard at the sleek Viridian Tower knew me. "Ms. Vale, go right on up." He smiled warmly. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor felt interminable. My reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman stretched thin, pale. I smoothed my blouse, took a steadying breath. Just lunch. The reception area was all glass, chrome, and hushed efficiency. Margot, Julian's immaculate assistant, looked up from her monitor. Her eyes widened, genuine shock flashing across her face before she masked it. "Cassandra, we weren't expecting you today." Her gaze darted towards Julian's imposing office door, then back to me, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "That's the point of a surprise, Margot." I lifted the deli bag, forcing a smile. "Just brought Julian lunch." "I'll wait." Margot stood abruptly, maneuvering around her desk, subtly blocking the path to the door. "Actually, he's in a very important call, specifically asked not to be disturbed. Perhaps I could—" "Is he alone in there, Margot?" My voice was low, dangerous. Her hesitation was the confession. Before she could formulate a lie, I walked past her. My hand closed on the cool steel handle of Julian's office door. I pushed it open. Time stopped. The air crackled, thick with betrayal. Julian leaned back against his massive teak desk, his suit jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled up. Vivian was pressed against him, her arms locked around his neck, her body arched towards his. Their mouths were fused together in a kiss that was anything but chaste. Hungry, familiar, possessive. Her skirt was hiked up. His tie was askew. The intimacy of their embrace screamed of countless stolen moments. The soft click of the door closing behind me finally broke the spell. They sprang apart like scalded cats. 3 faces frozen in a grotesque tableau of shock. Mine. Heron his. "Cassandra!" Julian recovered first, straightening his tie with jerky movements, his voice unnaturally smooth. "This isn't what it looks like." Vivian didn't bother with the lie. She smoothed her skirt, lifted her chin, her eyes defiant, challenging. "We didn't plan this, Cassie. It just happened." Her voice was steady, almost bored. The calm that settled over me was glacial. Absolute. How long, Julian? He glanced at Vivian, then back at me, his jaw tightening. Cassandra, let's discuss this privately. How long? My voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. Vivian answered. Since the engagement party. Months. Nearly half our engagement. While I'd been agonizing over calligraphy and centerpieces, they'd been betraying me. In this office. In my bed? The thought made bile rise in my throat. Julian moved behind his desk, putting physical distance between us, transforming the space into a negotiation. I didn't mean for this to happen, Cassandra. Feelings, evolve, change. I was going to tell you. After. After what? The words were shards of glass. After the wedding? After our honeymoon? When exactly was the right time, Julian? His voice took on the practiced cadence of a difficult merger talk. I was trying to minimize the damage. To you. The deli bag slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the plush carpet with a soft thud. I trusted you. Both of you. Vivian at least had the decency to look momentarily uncomfortable. It just happened, Becca. We tried to fight it. Don't. The childhood nickname was a fresh violation. Don't call me that. And nothing just happens for 4 months. You made choices, every text, every lie, every time you looked me in the eye and kissed me goodnight, knowing you'd been with her. Julian pressed the intercom button. Margot, please come in. Seconds later, Margot appeared, eyes fixed firmly on the floor. Please escort Ms. Vale out. She's upset. I'll escort myself, I said, my voice ringing with a dignity I didn't feel, my insides shattered. I looked from Julian's carefully composed mask to Vivian's defiant stare. You deserve each other. The elevator descent was a free-fall. By the time I reached the underground garage, the dam burst. Sobs racked my body, tearing from my throat. I fumbled with my keys, my vision blurred. The drive home was a smear of rain and traffic lights, a terrifying autopilot fueled by pure anguish. I remember stumbling into my apartment, collapsing onto the cold tile of the bathroom floor, unable to breathe, unable to think. The only lifeline I could grasp was my phone. I called Mom. Her voice, warm and familiar, broke the last thread of control. Mom, I choked, the words dissolving into incoherent sobs. She, office. Mom and Dad arrived within 20 minutes, using their emergency key. Mom found me curled on the bathroom floor, shuddering. She gathered me into her arms, rocking me like a child, murmuring soft, meaningless comforts that were the only anchors in the storm. Dad paced the living room like a caged lion, his face purpling with each fragmented detail I managed to gasp out. I'll kill him, he growled, his hand pressed against his chest. I swear to God, I'll kill them both. Thomas! Mom's voice was sharp, though her own eyes burned with fury. Your heart. Think. The days that followed were a numb, gray haze. Mom became my general, calling caterers, florists, the venue, her voice steady even as her hands shook. She wielded the phone like a shield against the world. Dad handled the brutal financial disentanglement, his face grim, his knuckles white. Returning the engagement ring felt like amputating a limb. I left it with Julian's doorman, unable to face him. When I dared to peek into his building lobby days later, I saw Vivian's expensive suitcases stacked near the concierge desk. She'd moved in. My replacement installed before my shadow had fully faded. Julian's email arrived, cold, efficient, CC'd, to his lawyer. It detailed the division of shared assets, furniture I'd chosen, art we'd bought together. A chilling postscript. Vivian assisted in cataloging your remaining personal effects for removal. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was a meticulous dismantling. Through hushed conversations with mutual friends who suddenly remembered their loyalty had limits, the sordid picture filled in. secret meetings whenever I worked late or traveled, Vivian actively pursuing him, accidental run-ins, suggestive texts, and photos sent when she knew I wouldn't see his phone. The whispers started, then became a roar in our social circle. Some friends stood staunchly by me. Others, swayed by Julian's influence and wealth, offered weak platitudes or faded away entirely. The worst were those who admitted, over awkward lunches, "We saw the chemistry, Cass, but we didn't want to meddle." Their cowardice was its own brand of betrayal. Mom was my rock. She brought homemade soup when I couldn't eat, listened to my tear-soaked rants until dawn, slept on my couch when the silence became a scream. She tried, desperately, to bridge the chasm between Vivian and me. She orchestrated painful family dinners at the bungalow that inevitably dissolved into icy silence or volcanic arguments. At one such excruciating meal, after I pointedly ignored Vivian's request for the salt shaker, Vivian snapped, "You always got everything first, Cassandra." Her voice was shrill, venomous. "The grades, the promotion at Sterling and Gray, the apartment with the view. For once, I got something before you did. Something you actually wanted." My fiancé wasn't a trophy to be won. My voice shook with fury. He was the man I loved and trusted. Mom slammed her hand on the table, the silverware jumping. "Vivian Marie Vale, you apologize to your sister this instant." Vivian sneered. "For what?" Being honest? Julian chose me. He loves me now. I stood, my napkin falling to my plate. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. I'm sorry." It was the last family dinner I attended with Vivian present. Dad's heart condition, always a concern, worsened dramatically under the strain. His doctor adjusted medications, ordered more tests. Mom aged years in months, the lines around her eyes deepening trenches of worry as she fought a losing battle to hold her fractured family together. 6 months after the world ended, I hit rock bottom. My therapist, her face grave, diagnosed major depressive disorder. Medication fogged the sharpest edges of the pain, but left me feeling hollowed out. Work suffered. I lost a major Microsoft account after zoning out during a crucial presentation, my mind replaying the office scene on a loop. My boss, kind but pragmatic, suggested a leave of absence. But staying in Seattle, where every street corner held a ghost, every restaurant a memory, was slowly killing me. When a director of brand innovation position opened at Sterling and Gray's Chicago office, I applied with the desperation of a drowning woman. The interview, fueled by adrenaline and sheer will, went surprisingly well. 2 weeks later, the offer landed in my inbox. Mom helped me pack my apartment, carefully wrapping photos and mementos in tissue paper, her movements slow and sad. As we taped shut a box labeled "Kitchen Donate," she broached the unspoken. "Will you ever consider forgiving Vivian?" she asked softly, her voice thick. I kept folding sweaters, not meeting her eyes. "I don't know, Mom. Not now. Maybe not ever." "Forgiveness isn't about them deserving it, sweetheart," she said, sitting beside me on the stripped-down mattress. "It's about freeing yourself from the poison." "I am freeing myself," I replied, my voice tight. "I'm moving to Chicago." Mom took my hands in hers, her touch warm and papery. "Running away isn't the same as healing, Cassandra." Tears welled in her eyes. "I need you to promise me something. Promise you'll call. Promise you won't shut us out completely." The tears spilled over then. "I promise." Saying goodbye at SeaTac was brutal. Dad hugged me longer than usual, his voice gruff with emotion. "You show 'em, kiddo. Build a life so damn good it'll make those two choke on their regret." Chicago was a shock to the system. My studio apartment in River North felt sterile, anonymous. The city's energy, louder, brasher, windier than Seattle, was overwhelming. I worked punishing hours, filling the empty evenings with takeout eaten at my desk, collapsing into bed, only to stare at the ceiling, loneliness was a physical ache. Then, the news arrived like a sucker punch. Mom called one Sunday morning, her voice carefully neutral. "Cassandra, I thought you should hear this from me. Vivian and Julian got married yesterday." A small civil ceremony featured prominently in Chicago Social Magazine's online society section, thanks to Julian's connections. The photo accompanying the article showed them beaming outside the Cook County courthouse. Vivian wore a deceptively simple ivory-sheathed dress. On her finger, flashing under the Chicago sun, was my diamond. That night was the abyss. I drank an entire bottle of Malbec. I scrolled obsessively through old photos of Julian and me on a hidden folder on my laptop, hiking Rainier, laughing at Pike Place Market, him looking at me with what I'd believed was love. I cried until my eyes were swollen slits, my throat raw. I called in sick the next day, a hollow shell, but somewhere in that suffocating darkness, a spark ignited. As the pale Chicago dawn filtered through my blinds, painting the sterile walls gray, I made a decision. This would be the last day Julian and Vivian owned my pain. I deleted the hidden folder, blocked their numbers and every social media account associated with them, took a scalding shower, imagining the grime of betrayal swirling down the drain. At work, I became relentless. I volunteered for the toughest accounts, worked weekends, rebuilt my reputation brick by brick. My boss noticed the change, the hollow eyes replaced by fierce focus, and entrusted me with major clients. Slowly, I carved out a niche for creativity and strategic brilliance. My first real friend in Chicago was Maya Rodriguez, the sharp, witty HR director who dragged me to a feminist book club meeting. Through Maya, I met others, a sculptor named Lena, a pediatrician named Priya. A fragile network began to form. Maya, ever the optimist, tried setting me up. "Cass, my cousin Ben is amazing. Lawyer, loves dogs, cooks." I declined every time. The thought of opening myself up again was terrifying. 8 months into my Chicago exile, I was sent to a massive consumer tech expo in Las Vegas to represent Sterling and Gray. On the second night, during a tedious networking dinner, I found myself seated next to Marcus Thorne. No relation, he assured me with a wry smile. He was different. Where Julian was all sharp angles and calculated charm, Marcus had a quiet solidity. Broad-shouldered dark hair touched with silver at the temples. Eyes a warm, intelligent brown. He listened more than he talked, asking thoughtful questions about market trends and consumer psychology. When he spoke about his work, running a venture capital firm focused on sustainable tech, his passion was evident, but never boastful. He asked for my card as we left the dinner. I gave it, expecting nothing. To my surprise, an email arrived the next morning. Subject: Chicago deep dish versus Seattle coffee. Further debate required. He asked if I'd like to continue our discussion about Gen Z brand loyalty over coffee before the day's sessions. Over the next 3 months, Marcus and I maintained professional contact. He referred promising startups to my agency for branding. I introduced him to key Chicago investors. Maya noticed our frequent work coffees. "He likes you, Cassandra," she declared one day over lunch, "and not just for your marketing genius." "We're colleagues," I insisted. "Colleagues," Maya snorted. "Don't look at each other the way Marcus Thorne looks at you when you're explaining attribution models, like you're revealing the secrets of the universe." Eventually, Marcus asked me to dinner. Not a client meeting. Dinner. At Sepia, a Michelin-starred temple of gastronomy. I panicked. I almost canceled twice. I stood outside the restaurant for 10 minutes, hyperventilating. I forced myself inside. 20 minutes in, discussing Murakami versus Ishiguro, the walls started closing in. My hands trembled. My vision tunneled. I couldn't draw a full breath. Tears welled, hot and humiliating. Instead of recoiling, Marcus moved to sit beside me. "Cassandra, His voice was calm, grounding. Look at me. Breathe with me. In, 2, 3, 4, hold. 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. He guided me through the panic attack with steady patience, ignoring the discreet stares. He drove me home in his understated Audi, walked me to my door. No pressure, he said softly. Just get some rest. No questions. No judgment. The next morning, an arrangement of deep purple orchids arrived at my office. The note read, "Deep breaths and good books. No expectations, just hoping you're okay." Marcus. That evening, I called him. I told him everything. Julian, Vivian, the office, the shattered trust. He listened. Completely. Silently. Then he shared his own story. His marriage ended when his wife left him for his CFO and business partner, taking half their fledgling company in a scorched-earth divorce settlement. Broken trust, he said, his voice rough with remembered pain. It leaves scars. Anyone worth your time will understand that healing isn't a straight line. We built slowly, painfully slowly at times. Friendship first. Trust, brick by agonizing brick. Marcus never pushed. He respected my boundaries with a quiet understanding that felt like sanctuary. He learned my triggers, crowded elevators, the scent of heavy gardenia perfume, sudden loud noises. He knew when to fill the silence and when to just hold my hand. For our 5th date, he cooked dinner at his Lincoln Park brownstone. Roasted chicken with herbs, fingerling potatoes, a simple green salad. Comfort food. Safety. When panic flickered at the edges, he was there, steady as a lighthouse in a storm. Slowly, tentatively, I began to believe again. In trust. In the possibility of love that didn't wound. 1 year after landing in Chicago, my life was unrecognizable. I'd been promoted to vice president of brand strategy, my corner office overlooking the Chicago River, a symbol of hard-won success. My circle of friends was strong, supportive, and Marcus Thorne, the quiet venture capitalist with the gentle eyes, had become the center of my universe. His love wasn't flashy yachts or ostentatious diamonds. It was in the oat milk latte waiting on my desk after a tough meeting. It was remembering my mother's birthday and sending flowers from both of us. It was listening, truly listening, to my fears and dreams. He celebrated my independence while offering unwavering support. Most importantly, he loved me for me, scars and all. Meeting Marcus's sister Claire during her visit from Denver was effortless. We bonded instantly over a shared love of terrible reality TV and obscure indie bands, exchanging numbers and building our own friendship. She shared stories of Marcus as a boy, fiercely protective, quietly brilliant, building elaborate Lego cities. He never gives up on what matters, she told me once. People, ideas, you. My weekly calls with Mom continued. We talked about Dad's improving health, her garden club, the weather. I carefully steered conversations away from Vivian. Dad occasionally joined, his gruff voice softening when he talked about my Chicago hustle. I visited twice that year, timing my trips when Vivian and Julian were reportedly skiing in Aspen or yachting in the Med. Mom provided sparse updates. Their marriage, according to carefully curated social media, was #couple goals. Lavish vacations, charity balls. They'd bought a historic mansion in Lincoln Park and were gutting it. Vivian asks about you sometimes, Mom mentioned tentatively during one call. What do you tell her? I asked, stirring tomato sauce on my stove. That you're thriving, building a beautiful life. A pause. Does she ever express regret? Mom sighed. In her way. She gets quiet when your name comes up. My therapy continued. My new therapist helped me reframe the betrayal, understand the patterns, build healthier defenses. The nightmares, Julian's empty eyes, Vivian's triumphant smile, gradually faded. In June, Marcus surprised me with a weekend trip to Michigan's Leelanau Peninsula. We stayed at a cozy inn surrounded by cherry orchards. Days were spent biking through vineyards, tasting crisp whites and bold reds. Evenings were for watching sunsets over Lake Michigan, wrapped in a shared blanket. For the first time in years, I felt truly, deeply present, happy, unhaunted. On our last evening, walking through the stunning gardens of the Frederick Meyer Gardens in Grand Rapids, Marcus stopped beneath a wisteria-draped arbor, the purple blooms heavy and fragrant. "Cassandra," he said, turning me to face him, his hands warm around mine. "This past year, knowing you, loving you, it's been the greatest gift of my life." He knelt. My breath hitched. The velvet ring box in his hand was small, unassuming. Panic flashed. Julian on the yacht, the monstrous diamond, the lie. But Marcus's eyes held only pure, steady love. "I'm not asking for an answer today," he said softly, seeing the flicker of fear. "I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or next year, I'll be here. I love you." Tears blurred my vision, but not from fear, from a profound sense of homecoming. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm ready now." The ring was nothing like Julian's showstopper, a single, square-cut emerald, the deep green of a forest pool, flanked by two small, brilliant diamonds. Elegant, unique, solid, like Marcus, like us. That night, I called my parents. Mom cried happy tears. "He sounds perfect, darling. When can we meet him?" "Very soon," I promised. We planned an intimate wedding, 30 guests at the exquisite Rookery Building atrium, sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling. At Mom's gentle urging, I sent Vivian an invitation, a gesture, not an expectation. Her response arrived via email. "Congratulations. Prior commitments prevent attendance. Best wishes." "Vivian," Mom sighed. "Give her time, Cassie." Baby steps. Our wedding day dawned clear and bright. Dad walked me down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Haven't seen you shine like this since you won that spelling bee in 3rd grade, kiddo," he whispered, his voice thick. Marcus's vows were a balm to my soul. "Cassandra, I promise to remember that love is both unbreakable and fragile, demanding care and commitment every single day. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me, knowing the immense courage that gift required." We built our life together in Chicago. A sprawling loft in the West Loop became our canvas. My career soared. I became CMO at Sterling and Gray. Marcus's firm, Thorn Capital, flourished, focusing on ethical tech and women-led startups. Then, the thread connecting past to present snapped taut. At a dinner with a prominent venture capitalist, the conversation turned to early tech investments in the Pacific Northwest. "Thorn," the man mused, swirling his scotch. "Yeah, you and Julian Reynolds had quite the rivalry back in the day, didn't you? Around 7 years ago? That wearable tech startup, Synapse. You backed them early. Reynolds bet big on their competitor, Neuralink. Synapse got acquired by Apple for what, $500 million? Neuralink imploded. Took Reynolds' first fund down with it. Brutal. Later, in the quiet of our loft, I confronted Marcus. He ran a hand through his hair, looking weary. "I was going to tell you. Eventually. I knew who you were when we met at the expo. Knew you'd been engaged to Reynolds. Not the details, but the connection." "Why didn't you say anything?" He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "I wanted you to know me. Marcus Thorn. Not the guy who happened to beat Julian Reynolds in a business deal, not someone connected to your pain. I wanted us to be ours, untouched." I wasn't angry. The symmetry felt fated, just 2 years into our marriage, we decided to try for a family. Months passed. Hope dwindled into frustration, then the clinical chill of fertility clinics, injections, timed cycles. crushing disappointments month after month. Marcus was my anchor through it all, holding me through tears, reminding me, family is love, Cass. However, it finds us. Then, the call that shattered our fragile peace. Mom's diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Marcus and I were on the next flight to Seattle. The oncologists were kind but grim. The cancer was aggressive, already metastasized. Mom put on a brave face, but the disease was a relentless thief. I took an indefinite leave, moved back into my childhood bungalow. Marcus flew in every weekend, a rock for both me and my increasingly frail father. In her final lucid moments, Mom and I talked about life, love, regrets. One afternoon, as I adjusted her pillows, smoothing the thin hospital blanket, she fixed me with her fading but determined gaze. I wish you girls could find peace. Life, too short for this distance. I know, Mom, I whispered, blinking back tears. Promise me you'll try, Cassie. Not for her, for yourself, and maybe a little for your old mom. Her hand, feather light, touched mine. I promised, not knowing if I could keep it, but needing to give her this peace. Eleanor Vale passed 3 days later, Marcus, Dad, and I holding her hands. Her breathing simply stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I called Vivian, directly, for the first time in 6 years. Mom's gone, I said when she answered, my voice surprisingly steady, a sharp intake of breath. Silence. Then brokenly, I'll be there in an hour. We met at the bungalow, hugged, briefly, awkwardly, then focused on Dad, on the grim logistics of death. The real reckoning would come at the funeral. The morning of the funeral was appropriately somber. A persistent Seattle drizzle misted the air, turning the streets slick and dark. I stood before the antique mirror in my old bedroom, adjusting the collar of my simple black dress. Marcus appeared behind me, resplendent and solid in his dark suit, his hands warm on my shoulders. I'm right here, he said, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection. Whatever happens today, every step. Downstairs, Dad sat slumped at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He looked diminished, hollowed out by grief. Ready, Dad? I asked softly, touching his shoulder. He nodded, rising slowly, his movements stiff. Your mother. She always said funerals are for the living. Never understood that. Till now. St. Ignatius was already filling when we arrived. A sea of black, murmured condolences, the cloying scent of lilies stronger than ever. I stayed glued to Dad's side, Marcus a protective presence on his other flank. We greeted faces from a past life, distant cousins, Mom's book club friends, neighbors who'd known me since pigtails. You have Eleanor's smile, my great-aunt Ida whispered, her papery hand patting mine. She talked about you. All the time. So proud. Each word was a tiny dagger, the low murmur crescendoed. Heads turned. The heavy doors opened again. Julian entered first, his expression carefully calibrated somber. Vivian followed, a vision of expensive grief. Her black dress was sculpted to her frame, diamonds flashing. That ring, a grotesque beacon on her finger. Dad stiffened beside me, his breath catching. Thomas, I murmured, squeezing his arm. Breathe. They made their way down the aisle, pausing for murmured exchanges. Vivian's smile was tight, brittle. Julian's nods were curt. Finally, they reached the front row. Vivian embraced Dad. He returned it stiffly, his arms barely closing around her. Julian extended his hand. Dad gave it a single, perfunctory shake, his eyes cold. Cassandra, Vivian said, turning to me. Her gaze swept over me, assessing. It's been a long time. Yes, I replied, my voice neutral. My armor was firmly in place. Marcus had stepped away momentarily to speak with the funeral director. Vivian seized the opening. "I need to speak with you," she hissed, gesturing towards a small antechamber off the main hall. "Privately." Against every screaming instinct, I followed. The room was small, lined with tissue boxes, smelling of old wood and dust. Vivian closed the door. Up close, I saw the fine lines etched around her eyes, the slight tension in her jaw beneath the expertly applied makeup. The strain was showing. "You look thin," she remarked, her gaze critical. "Gaunt, almost." "Grief," I replied flatly. She twisted the massive diamond ring around her finger, a nervous tick. "Julian and I closed on a summer estate, on Bainbridge Island, 7 bedrooms, private mortgage." She paused, waiting for a reaction I didn't give. "We're thinking about starting a family soon. Julian's firm just closed 2 major acquisitions. We're renovating the entire East Wing for a nursery." "Congratulations," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "Is there something specific about the service you wanted to discuss?" Her smile turned razor sharp. "I just thought you might appreciate knowing how well everything turned out." Poor Cassie. Still alone at 38. I got the man. The fortune. The life you thought you wanted. She leaned in slightly, her perfume, that same cloying noir enigma, overwhelming in the small space. Seems I won after all. A flicker of the old pain, quickly extinguished by the glacial calm. Her words weren't a dagger. They were the pathetic flailing of a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. I smiled. A genuine, chilling smile that reached my eyes. "Have you met my husband yet?" Her expression faltered, confusion flickering. "Husband?" "Marcus?" I called, opening the door. He was there instantly, his presence filling the doorway. "Come meet my sister." As Marcus stepped into the room, Julian appeared behind him, his face paling as recognition slammed into him. "Thorne!" Julian choked out, his confident facade cracking like cheap plaster. "Reynolds," Marcus acknowledged, his tone coolly professional, devoid of warmth. "It's been 7 years? Not since Apple acquired Synapse. Instead of your client, Neuralink. Right?" The names hung in the air, loaded with the weight of Julian's spectacular failure. Julian visibly swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "You two are married?" 2 wonderful years, I confirmed, slipping my hand into Marcus's. His grip was solid, grounding. "Marcus Thorne?" Vivian repeated slowly, the color draining from her face as the implications hit her. "Thorne Capital?" "The same," Marcus replied evenly. "Cassandra and I met at the Consumer Tech Expo in Vegas." Small world. Julian attempted to salvage the situation, plastering on a strained smile. "Marcus, we should catch up sometime. Been meaning to reach out. Explore synergies." "My schedule is exceptionally full," Marcus replied pleasantly, but his eyes were flint. "But my assistant handles all meeting requests. Feel free to contact the office." The dismissal was absolute. The funeral director appeared, saving us from further excruciating exchange. "We're ready to begin." As we returned to the main chapel, the whispers were audible. The connection was known. The rivalry remembered. The victor and the vanquished, bound by marriage to sisters. We took our seats. The organ began the mournful opening chords. Then Dad gasped. His hand flew to his chest, his face contorted in sudden agony. "Dad!" I cried out, panic surging. Marcus was already moving, pulling out his phone, calling 911 even as he supported Dad's sagging weight. The service halted. Chaos erupted. We moved Dad to the quiet antechamber Vivian and I had just vacated. A doctor from the congregation rushed in. Tense minutes ticked by. Stress. Not a heart attack, but serious. Terrifying. Vivian followed us in, her face pale, her earlier bravado gone. "Is he okay? Should we call an ambulance?" Her voice shook with genuine fear. "The doctor thinks it's stress," I managed, surprised by the raw concern in her eyes. Overwhelmed. For 20 agonizing minutes, we sat in strained silence, Vivian, Marcus, Julian, hovering awkwardly in the doorway, and me, united only by shared fear for the man who connected us. When Dad insisted on continuing the service, pale but determined, we returned. The brief crisis forged an uneasy truce. The funeral was a blur of tears and cherished memories. I delivered my eulogy, my voice cracking only once as I spoke of Mom's unwavering love, her quiet strength, her belief in second chances. When Vivian rose to speak after me, her voice trembled from the first sentence. She faltered, tears choking her words. Without conscious thought, I moved to stand beside her, placing a steadying hand on her back. "It's okay," I whispered. "Take your breath." She looked at me, stunned, then nodded, gathering herself. She spoke haltingly of Mom teaching us to bake, of shared Christmases, finishing with a raw vulnerability I hadn't seen in her since we were children. At the cemetery, under a weeping gray sky, we laid Mom to rest. I noticed Julian standing apart, checking his watch, his expression impatient. Vivian stayed close to Dad, her hand on his arm, her grief seeming real, unvarnished. The reception back at the bungalow was a crush of people and casseroles. Julian drank heavily, his discomfort palpable as he watched Marcus engaged in deep conversation with several influential figures from Seattle's tech scene. I overheard snippets, over-leveraged on the Beacon Hill property. Neuralink settlement still dragging. Liquidity crisis. Vivian's boasts about Bainbridge Island rang hollow. I moved through the crowd with the dignity Mom deserved, focusing on Dad, on honoring her memory. The old wounds throbbed, but the ice held. As guests began to leave, I caught Vivian watching me. Her expression was complex. Grief, confusion, perhaps a dawning awareness. The mask was slipping. The day after the funeral, Marcus had to return to Chicago for a critical board vote. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" he asked, packing his bag, his worry etched on his face. "I can reschedule." "Dad needs help sorting through Mom's things," I explained. "I should stay. I'll be fine." After seeing Marcus off at SeaTac, I returned to the bungalow. Dad was sitting in Mom's beloved rose garden, a weathered photo album open on his lap. "She labeled everything," he said, his voice thick, showing me Mom's neat script beneath a picture of us building sandcastles at Elkey Beach. "Said someday we'd appreciate knowing who was who." That afternoon, I began the heartbreaking task of sorting Mom's clothes. Each hanger held a memory. The lavender dress she wore to my college graduation, the floral wrap she loved for Sunday brunches, the elegant navy suit she'd chosen for my engagement party. I found myself talking to her, telling her about Chicago, about Marcus, about the quiet joy I'd found. In her bedside drawer, beneath neatly folded scarves, I found a journal, soft brown leather, worn at the edges. Inside, Mom's elegant handwriting filled the pages, entries spanning years. Many spoke of her daughters, her hopes, her sadness. March 12th. Vivian called today, bubbling about the Bainbridge house, but when I mentioned Cassandra's promotion, the line went quiet. The chasm between them breaks my heart. My girls. August 3rd. Thomas's cardiologist appointment went well. Thank God. I worry about the strain this feud puts on him, on all of us. If only they could see. The final entry, dated 10 days before her death, stopped my breath. My greatest regret, my deepest sorrow, is the thought of leaving this world with my girls still locked in this terrible silence. I see the pain in Cassandra's eyes, the brittle shell Vivian has built. I tried to fix things, as I always did. But some broken things resist mending. I pray they find their way back to each other, somehow, before it's truly too late. Love alone isn't always enough. But God, how I wish it were. The doorbell rang, pulling me from the raw grief on the page. Through the front window, I saw Vivian standing alone on the porch. No Julian. No sleek car idling at the curb. Just her, looking smaller, less certain in simple black slacks and a sweater. I opened the door. "Hi," she said, her voice tentative. "Can I come in?" In the familiar kitchen, I made coffee. Strong, black, the way we both used to drink it. Vivian sat silently at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with a fingertip. "Where's Julian?" I asked finally, placing a mug before her. "At the office, or the club, or wherever he goes." She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. "He doesn't know I'm here." Silence stretched, thick with years of unsaid words and shared history. "I'm sorry," she blurted out suddenly, the words raw. "About yesterday, at the funeral home, what I said. It was cruel, petty, completely inappropriate." She looked down at her hands. "Mom deserved better. You deserved better." I nodded, acknowledging the apology without embracing it. "I found Mom's journal." Vivian flinched. "Dad showed it to me last night. Her last wish." Her voice cracked. "Reconciliation requires more than just proximity, Vivian," I said softly. "It needs honesty. Brutal honesty." She looked up, tears welling, spilling over. "You want honesty? Fine. Here it is." Her voice was a broken whisper. "I'm miserable, Cassandra. Have been almost since the beginning." The dam burst. Words tumbled out, choked with sobs. Julian had changed after the wedding. The charm curdled into control. His criticism was constant, cutting. His business was a house of cards, each new acquisition a desperate gamble masking mounting debt. The mansions, the cars, the vacations, all financed on the edge of ruin. Their marriage was a meticulously staged performance for investors and society pages. He controls my spending, monitors my phone, questions where I go, who I see. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara. "The Julian you thought you knew? He doesn't exist. Maybe he never did. Why stay?" The question hung in the air. "Shame," she answered instantly, her voice raw. "How could I come crawling back? Admit I destroyed our family, betrayed my sister for this and the prenup." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Ironclad. I leave with nothing, not even my dignity." I pushed Mom's journal across the table towards her. "Read it. All of it." As Vivian read, her tears fell onto the pages, blurring Mom's careful script. Her shoulders shook. When she finally looked up, her face was stripped bare, raw with grief and regret. "She knew," Vivian whispered. "She saw through everything." "Mom always did," I said quietly. "I've hated myself for years, Cassie," she confessed, the childhood nickname slipping out unconsciously. "Every time Mom talked about you, your life in Chicago, your job, every accomplishment she shared with such pride, it was like salt in the wound I created. I'm planning to leave him. I've been seeing a lawyer." Quietly. The emotions were a tangled knot: vindication, pity, residual anger, and an unexpected surge of protective sorrow for the broken woman across the table. The sister I'd loved, then hated. The sister whose choices had brought us both to this painful place. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added, her voice small. "I know I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know the truth. Before I blow up what's left of my life." We spent the next few hours in the quiet sanctuary of the bungalow, sorting through Mom's belongings together. Not as adversaries, but as two women bound by shared grief and a complicated history. We unearthed memories: the mismatched teacups we'd painted for Mom one Mother's Day, the quilt she'd painstakingly stitched from scraps of our childhood dresses. Remember how she used to sing off-key in the car? Vivian asked, a faint smile touching her lips as she held a faded recipe card for Mom's famous chocolate chip cookies. Always so loud, embarrassing us to death. I chuckled, the sound strange in the heavy air. And she never made separate batches. Always insisted chocolate chip was superior, even though you loved sugar cookies. Remember the notes? Vivian asked softly, folding a delicate lace handkerchief. In our lunchboxes. Every single day. Different messages. Never repeated one. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. She found a book of quotes, wore out the pages. The healing wasn't instant. The wounds were deep, the scar tissue thick. But as the afternoon light faded, painting the room in gold and shadow, something fundamental had shifted. A fragile bridge, built by Mom's enduring love and her final, desperate wish, stretched across the chasm of years. "What will you do?" I asked as Vivian gathered her purse to leave. "File for divorce when my lawyer gives the green light," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of resolve. "Find a small apartment. Get a job. A real one. Start over." She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "What about you?" "Back to Chicago." "Yes," I said simply. "My life is there, with Marcus." "You seem happy," she observed. Not a question, a quiet acknowledgement. "I am," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Truly happy." "I'm glad," she whispered. "One of us should be." We hugged. Briefly. Awkwardly. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a fragile truce. A tentative beginning, forged in the ashes of our shared loss. Back in Chicago, life resumed its rich, fulfilling rhythm. My brownstone office at Sterling and Gray buzzed with creative energy. Our West Loop loft felt like a true home, filled with books, art collected on our travels, and Marcus's quiet presence. 6 months after Mom's funeral, after years of heartbreak and medical procedures, I stared in disbelief at the small plastic stick. 2 pink lines. A miracle, blooming against all odds. The joy was tinged with sadness that Mom wouldn't hold her grandchild, but I felt her in the quiet strength that settled over me, in the way Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he held the test. Vivian and I maintained cautious contact. Phone calls, tentative at first, growing gradually less strained. She'd filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abuse. Julian fought dirty, leveraging his remaining connections, but Vivian, stripped of her illusions, fought back with a quiet ferocity I hadn't known she possessed. She moved into a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Belltown, found a job as a junior marketer at a small nonprofit. The social ostracization was brutal, the whispers vicious. But she faced it, head on. No more diamonds, no more facades. Just Vivian, rebuilding from the ground up, scarred but alive. The path that led me to this sunlit nursery, watching Marcus carefully paint the walls, a soft, buttery yellow. Sunshine, Cass, for our little Ray, was paved with betrayal and heartbreak. Losing Julian felt like the end of my world, but it was merely the death rattle of a life built on shifting sand. With Marcus, I found not just love, but profound partnership, mutual respect, unshakable trust. His success never diminished mine, it amplified it. We were 2 strong trees, roots intertwined, branches reaching towards the same sun. Mom was right. Forgiveness wasn't about absolving Vivian or Julian. It was about releasing the poison they'd left festering inside me. The weight of that anger, the corrosive resentment, had lifted gradually, like a fog burning off the lake. It allowed me to see my past with clarity, not bitterness. My future wasn't defined by their betrayal, it was built in spite of it. The scars remained, thin, silvery lines across my heart. But they no longer defined me. They were reminders of survival, of resilience, As Marcus dipped his brush, humming softly, his shirt speckled with yellow paint, I placed a hand on the gentle swell beneath my sweater. Our child. A new beginning. A testament to love that endures, that heals, that rebuilds from the ashes. My life, this beautiful, messy, authentic life, was richer than anything I could have imagined in those shattered days 6 years ago. Not despite the knife Vivian plunged into my back, but because of the fierce, determined way I learned to stand again, to build something true and strong on the ruins they left behind. The revenge wasn't in a shout or a scene or a downfall I orchestrated. It was in this quiet, sunlit room, in this profound peace, in the undeniable truth that I had not just survived their betrayal, I had transcended it. And that was the sweetest, most satisfying reckoning of all.